All right, guys, do not tease me for how I look. Do not tease me for how I sound. I will tell you what, we're on the grind a little bit out here. So back up, feel you what's going on in my life, but I was out in Vegas. I went out for the fights, and I come home, and I knew this was going to happen. Big storm in Portland and Oregon. And there's many parts of the country, by the way, like I don't expect you to feel bad for us. There's many parts of the country this would be no big deal. I will tell you, in Oregon, we are not prepared for that. We just don't get storms. That's just not a thing that happens. We've had a couple of weird things this year. The whole state was on fire 4 or 5 months ago. I mean, on fire. You could not see. People being evacuated from their houses. So, all right, flip the script. Snow comes, but the big problem was it then rained for 72 hours and was never above 28 degrees. In other words, freezing rain, which is extremely heavy. So not only the driving conditions, but now Oregon is known for trees. If you're ever out here, our license plates have trees on them. Trees everywhere. So these trees got so much weight on them from this ice that they fall into power lines. So it's a mess. I mean, you can't get around the roads. If you find a way to get in and out of the roads and you have the traction to then deal with the ice, wherever it is you're going, use home by example, you're going to have no power. So you kind of like this 3-prong approach. And so I'm in a hotel. I'm home, but I'm in a hotel. And I got the hotel just so I could talk to you guys, just so I could have some power, fire up, and digress everything that's going on in the world of MMA. But I thought I would disclose for you that Vince and Ryan and I, man, we're doing the best we can with equipment. And here we are to come at you. And let's back up to the fights. So mainly one that I want to discuss, which is Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. Now, we all, and I am guilty, have a habit of, as soon as somebody gets done fighting, particularly in a title fight and particularly a main event of a pay-per-view, coming and discussing this is the greatest of all time. We have that habit. Now, Kamaru's going to have a hard time becoming greatest of all time when you've got GSP out there. However, he is closing that gap. He is very much closing that gap. I mean, truly, if you ever were to discuss the greatest welterweight of all time and you don't say George St-Pierre, you now look like a fool. You will have lost credibility. Usman is the first guy ever where you could say and make an argument and nobody's going to not talk MMA with you again. Here's the thing. It wasn't surprising. Usman was a over 2-1 favorite. And I was in Vegas, so let me talk to you guys about the odds a little bit because I was surprised. I predicted that Usman would win this fight. Perhaps you joined me in that. But he went off at it was almost 2.5. There was times in the week where it approached 3-1. But the people at the casinos, and I was there, the people at the casinos were saying that was fan money. That whenever they dealt with an insider, a fighter, a coach, somebody from the organization, that money was coming in on Burns. And you will have fights like that, and it's usually the inside guys that are right. I can remember back, just by example, Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva. That was a huge upset. But the locker room wasn't surprised. They knew who Weidman was. They knew it was a matchup issue. I mean, I just bring that match for you as an example. Weidman was also about a 3-1 underdog. But the people that were in the industry and the fellow athletes were not surprised. That's what they were predicting. So at any rate, it was going the other way, and the athletes were favoring Burns. So I say that to you because, Kamaru's not going to get this huge, oh my God, I can't believe you just beat Gilbert Burns moment. He was expected to beat Gilbert Burns by the masses. However, it was so impressive how he did it. It wasn't surprising he did it. It was impressive how he did it because this fight starts, Burns comes right at him. Burns throws a right hand, it lands, Usman goes down. It was enough of a stumble and it was enough of, you call it a knockdown, right? His hands touch, you call it a knockdown. So right when that happens, any other fight in the history of the sport says the dominant wrestler goes to wrestling. Every fight without exception. If somebody is hit, particularly hurt and knocked down, and they are the dominant wrestler, they now go into full wrestling mode, and they do it with an urgency. Usman elected to stay on his feet. He elected to stay on, not he stayed on his feet. Make sure you hear this word. He elected to stay on his feet and solve the problem. And the problem had to do with the power of Burns, and that power didn't go away. But Usman was doing things. He began to control a fight with a jab. Every boxer or striking guy, whoever comes into MMA, particularly on their very first day, are going to tell you how important the jab is and that you got to go to the body. I never see MMA guys throwing jabs, and I never see them going to the body. This is what you got to do. And this striking coach is going to be the new coach of MMA because he's the one that's identified it. Well, after about 3, 4, 5 months, that boxing coach is not saying that same thing. He realizes why we don't do jabs in MMA. I mean, he realizes why you've never seen a fight controlled with a jab, that it's just not one of those weapons. Realizes that it's power shots because of the small gloves. Realizes the problem with dipping lower in elevation and digging to the body. The guy's going to clinch you and knee you in the face. I mean, it's just one of these things that isn't as obvious from day one. The relevance is, though, I have seen 2 fights in the history of my life that were MMA fights that were controlled by a jab. George St-Pierre versus Josh Koscheck, Part 2, and Usman versus Burns. So when you're watching Usman elect to stay on his feet where he just got the short end of the stick, oh, by the way, he figures it out. Oh, by the way, turns out he's ambidextrous. He's going orthodox to southpaw back and forth. And oh, by the way, I should mention, he wasn't only hurt with that first right hand I just talked about. He was hurt 2 more times. There was a head kick that hurt him. There was a knee to the face and solar sternum that hurt him. He still stayed on his feet to solve this problem and then did. It was unbelievable. It was truly unbelievable to watch him reset. Kamaru Usman has a mind as good as any mind I've ever seen for competition. He has an ability to reset. He has an immense amount of patience. And patience in combat is even more rare. I mean, I don't have it. Wish I did. Would have been a lot better. But I don't have it. It was too chaotic. There was too many moving parts happening very fast right now to be patient. Usman can reset, and you can see it on his face. You can see his face every time he hits a reset button in a fight. Recomposes himself, doesn't worry about what's already happened, and doesn't worry about what he wants to happen. Right now. He is in the moment right now. I know those words sound simple. Guys, to do that in sport is incredibly difficult. And to watch Usman do, and then start to control a fight with a jab. I mean, even the ending sequence of this fight, when Burns went down from a jab. That's how hard Usman is hitting him. That's the power that Usman is generating. And it's a weapon we haven't seen Usman do before. We've seen him jab. We have never seen him control a fight. We've never seen him control a round with a jab. When you have the best in the world, and I've only seen this a couple of times, Henry Cejudo, guilty of it. John Jones, guilty of it earlier in his career. And Usman, right now. Best in the world, who between fights is getting better. The Usman that fought Burns, again, it not surprising he won, but it was impressive how he did it. The Usman that fought Burns versus the Usman that won the Ultimate Fighter. The Usman who won the Ultimate Fighter gets stopped in less than 7 minutes by the Usman that fought Burns. The best in the world is seeking new advice, new information. He did it in the form of a new camp and is looking to grow and expand the gap between himself and the field. And again, if the only talk that you can have is down to 2 and it's Usman and GSP, those are the things that George did. George never one time stopped or thought this is enough. I'm going to maintain and hold. George was always looking to extend the gap between himself and everybody else. I'm watching Usman do it. Guys, it's very difficult to verbally express how impressed I am with Usman and seeing this drive within him. He gets done with the fight. He calls out Masvidal. That's a hard night out. That's the BMF, period. Official. So the champion of the world called out the hardest guy and was angry when he did it. Had a chip on his shoulder. Something that Usman had said about him somewhere, and it got to him. I would imagine there was a lot of things, and it probably came through social media. That's not the point. The point is the champ was angry. Champ was not content. The champ was not complacent. And the champ called for a fight against the BMF. Now, I will tell you, I don't know if that's going to happen, by the way. I don't know. There was talk about talking about Usman and Masvidal getting back in there. There was talk on one of their sides that they wanted to do the Ultimate Fighter. I would have a feeling if you could get them for the Ultimate Fighter, Dana would go, great. No problem with that caveat. I would imagine that. You also have discussion of Leon Edwards fighting Colby Covington. And each day that goes by that fight is not announced, the less likely that fight is, for me. But it would be very difficult, in fairness. Colby Covington's the hardest fight Usman's ever had, and the closest fight he ever had. That was 2-2 going into the fifth. That was 2-2, 2.5 to 2.5 going into the last part of the fifth, right? I mean, that was just one of these great matches where I think we're all sure they're going to match up again. But let's say Colby goes in there with Edwards. Edwards certainly being deserving, we would not want to slide him. If Edwards can get the jump on Colby, let's give it to Edwards. I mean, right, you see how that goes? So where the room is for Masvidal to slide in, I think there is room. I just don't know that we would be wise to predict that is a foregone conclusion. And it also, on the more disappointing side of the story, looks as though Chimaev is going to be knee-deep in red tape of self-care. Shout out to Chimaev, by the way. Reading what he's going through, he's struggling a little bit. It looks like he's through the worst, but he's still stuck in the woods a little bit there. So we'll see where that division goes. But if you come away with anything after watching Usman on Saturday, anything less than stunningly impressed with how he has improved after already being the best. When I talk about Colby Covington was the closest and the hardest, that's 100% true. But the gap down from Colby, closest anybody's been is Masvidal. Masvidal lost all 5 rounds according to 2 official judges and won one of the rounds according to the 3rd judge. And that's the second closest match Usman's ever had. I mean, you got to wonder at some point, what would you do in that situation? If you're the top of the bill, you're the champion, and you got a jackpot full of money, are you still motivated to get better? Are you motivated to continue to work as hard to make sure the gap is growing between yourself and the field when the gap is already 4 rounds to 1? Right? I mean, I guess you could do what Usman's doing and go get a whole bunch better, or you can I'm just going to stay away from Colby for a little bit. Seen fighters do that all the time. Usman's not staying away from anybody. I was blown away. I was blown away with what I saw. I was blown away with the hard work, the dedication. I was blown away with the interview where he was showing a chip in his shoulder and anger. Because you lose that with success. There's nothing you can do. It's human nature, but you lose that with success. Man, Usman was flat pissed off. And I loved it.